All right. So in today's video, I'm going to try not to get in too much of a rant with this, but we're going to talk about my custom shelf, what I call my mega shelf. Now, I often get asked how I customize the Maya interface to make my workflow more efficient. And the simple truth to that is that I can't really customize it that much because of what I do. Because I'm a teacher, and my main goal is to be an effective teacher and to teach as efficiently as possible. I kind of need to just work with the default user interface, and then later on, I can let students sort of figure out how they want to customize their user interface to speed up their workflow. But for me personally, I've tried using, say, a custom interface at home, and then I go into the classroom and I'm working with the default interface. And in those cases, I end up just sort of stumbling around because I get used to working with everything in one location, and I have to kind of reevaluate on the fly, like as I'm teaching. So that makes me less efficient as a teacher, right? Because I stumble around a little bit, and things aren't where I normally find them. And then I can't really customize my interface too much in the classroom because then students are going to have issues looking at my screen and looking at their screen, and it looks completely different. I have tools in some places. They're not going to find tools in the same places in the default interface that they see. So at the end of the day, it's just much more efficient for me to work with the default interface in Maya. And so because of that, there's not really a lot I can customize. There are two things I do like to play around with a little bit, and that is colors. And that's a pretty easy one because students will ask, well, why are my colors different than yours? I can just say, well, here's how you change and customize your own colors. That's a very easy thing for me to show them how to do. And the other thing that I will edit or update periodically is my own custom shelf that I use. It's sort of like comprised of the tools that I use more than anything else. So today we're going to talk about my custom shelf and how to create your own custom shelf. And I kind of want to go over all the different things that I have in my custom mega shelf and why they're there. And occasionally I'll add if a new version of Maya comes out and there's a new feature, I'll add something new. Like you can see that I have the new Smart Extrude right there that I've added, and it's got the green brackets around it. It's a new feature, right? So while I do encourage everyone to customize their Maya interface to make them a more efficient creator, whether you're animating or 3D modeling, I highly recommend and really encourage everyone to sort of explore a custom interface of the tools and just things to make them a more efficient, give them a more efficient workflow. But for me as a teacher, as a college professor, I have to be an efficient college professor, right? I have to be an efficient teacher. And in order for me to do that, it's best if we're just all on the same playing field, using all the default interface. So for the most part, my Maya that I use at home and the Maya that I use in the classroom is just the default interface. Okay, so let's start by just thinking about what kind of shelf we want to create. For me, I really wanted a shelf that had all the tools that I use most often, all in one place. So I don't have to go through and, if I'm creating a mesh network or if I'm doing animation, rigging, UV editing, I still have all of these available. So if I do, for example, if I do want to create some in cloth and go to FX and create some in cloth, I still have that tab available. But trying to shave, seconds at a time off of my workflow, switching between these shelves, I noticed was starting to take a considerable amount of time for me. So I wanted to make a shelf where I have everything that I use most oftenly in one shelf. So this is going to look completely different for you than it looks for me. I'm going to explain all of the functions that I have on my shelf, but depending on the tools that you most often use, yours is going to look completely different from mine. If you're an animator, more of an animator, or if you're more of a motion graphics person, your interface is going to look completely different. But I want to say that you should, if you're going to make a all-in-one shelf like I have here, you want to try to keep that to tools that you use most often, right? There's a lot of tools available that I think are really cool, and I have a lot of fun using them, but I don't use them very often. And I try to keep my mega shelf here to tools that I use most often. And I try to, occasionally I'll take things away and I'll add things to my mega shelf. If I find that I'm using a new tool, like pretty often, I'll add that. If I see a tool and I'm like, I hardly ever use that, I'll take that away from my shelf. So try to keep your shelf as streamlined as possible, and try to keep it to the tools that you most often use. Those other tools are still going to be available to you in the other tabs, but I try to keep mine to the tools that I use most often. Now, when it comes to creating a custom shelf, all we have to do is go to this little cog over here on the left, and we can say new shelf. And then I can name this shelf anything I want. I'm just going to name this Glenn's shelf. And it's going to tell me that my name contains illegal characters, so I can't have an apostrophe in there. So let's just try Glenn Shelf. And I think the space is also an illegal character, even though there is one up here. We may have to use an underscore. I'm going to delete this shelf anyway. But there is our new shelf, and it's currently empty. All right, now there's a few different ways you can add things to your shelf. The easiest way is to just hold down Control or Command, Shift, and then add them. So for example, say I want to use my multi-cut tool. That's a tool that I use constantly, probably one of my most used tools, right? So in order to add my multi-cut tool, I'm going to hold down Control or Command, Shift, and then just click on my multi-cut tool. And now I have my multi-cut tool here. So let's let's just create a sphere here. And then go back to my shelf and see that I can now click on my multi-cut tool and I have my multi-cut tool, right? Now you can also add a button for the options for the multi-cut tool. So if I hold down Control and Shift and go to Mesh Tools, and I can add one for the options as well. So that one will bring up the tool options. There it goes. For some reason, it's a little finicky sometimes. It wants to bring up just regular tool settings, right? Like that, instead of the multi-cut tool. Not quite sure what's happening there, but that will generally bring up your tool options. So if you do like to change your settings in your multi-cut tool occasionally, that is going to allow you to have both of those. So that's one way to add tools to your shelf. The other way is to drag and drop them from another shelf. Now, for example, if I want to add like this area light into my custom shelf, I can just First, I want to make sure that my interface is unlocked here. So up at the very top right corner, you have a little lock. If that is locked, I cannot, or it shouldn't let me do it. It actually is letting me do it. So actually thought that would lock my interface in that way, but it looks like it doesn't. But what we can do is we can say, I want an area light. I can drag and drop an area light into that Glen shelf. Now, when I do that, it takes it away from my Arnold shelf. So that's not necessarily something I want. So I'm going to drag and put that back into my Arnold shelf, and then just middle mouse click and put that back into position there. Now what I can do instead is I can hold down Control or Command and then middle mouse click and drag that into the shelf that I want it to be in. And I can basically add a duplicate of that, right? So that's not taking it out of one shelf and putting it in another one. It's adding a duplicate to that. So that's two different ways to add a custom button or custom tool to your custom shelf. Now, there are other ways you can add tools to your shelf via scripts and things like that, and we will cover that. But you can also customize this a bit more, which we'll dive in a little bit deeper here. But if I go to my cog again, right here on the left, and click Shelf Editor, this will bring up my shelf editor. And here I can do things like add custom icons. So for example, I have my multi-cut tool, and then I have my menu item, which is my multi-cut tool. I can click here and I can add in a custom icon. What I generally like to do is I will look for, if we click this Maya button, it will bring up the Maya default icons. So I can then look for a different sort of icon for that multi-cut tool settings, right? So just depending on what I want. So maybe I can find one that says, let's go down to M's, see if we have one for multi-cut tool settings. So there's multi-cut. There's a smaller multi-cut. There's multi-cut face, multi-cut snap. Anyway, I can add any of these. So let's say I want this one to be my multi-cut menu instead of the multi-cut tool itself. I can then click select, and then that icon up there will change to a different icon. So that's in a nutshell how you can sort of add tools to your custom shelf. Now you can delete them just by right clicking and deleting, or you can edit pop-up. I'm, to be honest, not really quite sure what that does. I've never looked at that before. You can also edit the script that creates. So let's next dive into my custom shelf, my mega shelf, and all the different tools that I have on my mega shelf. And again, this is going to be different for everyone, just depending on what you use most often. And there are some examples here that as I'm going to be going through this, I'm realizing that there's some of these tools that I don't use very often. I may have added them because I thought it was cool. And I'll talk about, there's one in particular that I will talk about. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. And let's just go down the line here of all my tools that I have in my custom mega shelf. So the first one, obviously, just create a default sphere. I actually want to change this one if I can figure it out. I don't particularly like using spheres. And this is something I need to try to write a script for if I can. But what I would like to do instead of creating a custom sphere is create a cube that is smoothed, right? I want to, instead of using a sphere, instead of having that as a button, I want to make a button that will create this. I'm not quite sure how to do that yet. I'll have, hopefully maybe somebody watching can help me figure that out, but I know it's going to need to be a script of some sort, but I would like to be able to just create this really quickly than a sphere, because I find myself using these smoothed cubes as spheres more often than actual spheres. But that's the first one that I have there, quite simply creating a sphere. And again, I added that just by going to create polygon primitives, control shift, and then click sphere. And that added that to that menu. The next one is creating a cube. And then I actually have another one that will create a cube with drag, what's it called? Drag and drop turned on, or drag select, or drag draw, whatever that's called. Create polygons, interactive creation. So I have another cube with interactive creation turned on, and all I did there was I turned that on and I created a button for that, and then I just found a custom icon for that. I used the NURBS cube icon. This is one that I don't really use very often. I want to try to use it more, and I think that's initially why I put that on my mega shelf, is because I found this being really cool, that I can just draw cubes basically on top of cubes. Let me see if I can show you that. So I can grab this cube here, and if I make it live, so if I go click on this magnet right here to make that live, I can then draw another cube right on top of this cube. Right, drag. Right, so I thought that was a really cool feature, and it's something that I want to possibly try to use more often, because it's a really quick way to block out shapes. So that's something that I don't use a ton, but I thought it was a cool thing to add to my shelf, so I added that. Now the next thing I have is just a plane, because I find myself using planes quite a bit. I may add just a plane without any divisions. This plane does have divisions, but I find myself using planes with no divisions more often than planes with divisions. So I may change this to just have no divisions. The next thing we see here is a separator. Separators are a bit more complicated to create. So let me really quickly just show you how to create a separator, and then we'll move forward. So to create a separator, what you need to do is create a custom shelf button. So when you first start making your shelf, I would recommend just doing this right off the bat, and then sort of make a bunch of separators, and then you can just delete the ones that you don't need. So let's do this in my Glen shelf here. So what I'm going to do is go over to my script editor, and I already have it written out here, but it's basically going to be in your mel script command, you're going to type in lowercase add, capital S, shelf, capital S, separator, and then open and close parentheses. And see, it didn't turn blue because I spelled separator wrong. There we go. And now once that turns blue, what you can do is highlight this and you go to File, and you can say Save Script to Shelf. And we can name this something just like Sep for separator. Right, and then you get this little custom button in your shelf here, and then I can just click that and add a bunch of separators. So Go ahead and do that when you first start creating your shelf. Just add a bunch of separators, more than you think you would need, and then you can always just delete them afterwards. And I'll show you how to delete them as well. So that's how we create our custom separator there. So let's jump back to the mega shelf. So next thing we have here is the text function. This is a function that I use quite a bit for various different things. Obviously, for creating text is probably the most common one that I use this for. But it's a very useful tool if you do want anything type or text. So I do enjoy using that tool quite a bit. And then I also use the SVG tool quite a bit. This allows me to just like copy and paste a vector graphic from Illustrator into Maya, which is super helpful. And it's something that I use a lot. I find myself a lot of times, if I'm working from a sketch or something, I will sketch it out in Illustrator, especially if it's a really complicated shape. Sketch it out in Illustrator and then just bring it over into Maya using this tool. And a lot of times what I do is I'll sketch something out in Illustrator, bring it into Maya, retopologize it in Maya, and then take it into ZBrush and actually sculpt it. So if it's a really sort of complicated shape that's very sketchy and organic, a lot of times I'll draw them in Illustrator, bring them in via this SVG tool, retopologize, and then actually take them into something like ZBrush and Mudbox and sculpt them. So that is a function that I enjoy using quite a bit. Next one is Sweep Mesh. This one's really great for creating wires, tubes, pipes, things like that. All you need is a curve, basically, so I can just draw a curve, bringing me to my next tool, which is my Bezier curve tool. So I can just come in here and draw a curve, right? And then I can, with that curve selected, I can do a sweep mesh. And then I have certain settings here that I can play around with for that sweep mesh. Very cool tool. I really like using that sweep mesh a lot. So I like having that on my shelf. The next two, of course, is just two different curve tools. One is a Bezier curve tool. So this one lets you create these curves with Bezier handles or sharp corners like this. And then we can then go in and edit these Bezier handles if we need to. And then just a draw curve. This one's very straightforward. I can just draw a curve like that. So two of the curve tools that I use most frequently. And then I have another spacer separator. And then, of course, we have freeze center pivot, freeze transformations, and delete history. So these two I use constantly. And everyone who's a frequent modeler should be using these constantly. I think the only thing that I may add to this is this current is just delete by type history. I may want to add a delete all by type history. So I want to I'm going to go ahead and add that actually. So I'm going to go to edit, delete all by type, hold down Control and Shift and add a delete all by type history. And then I'm just going to middle mouse drag that over here. That gets a different icon for whatever reason. So let's go ahead and try to find a custom icon for that. So let's go to Shelf Editor, Mega Shelf, and let's look for that history. Let's see if we have a icon that looks similar. I want one that usually I try to look for something that looks similar to what that function does. In this case, I can look at the delete history one and try to see if I can find something similar. Delete time. I mean, that one might actually Actually, yeah, we'll use that one. So because it's going to delete the history of everything, I like that icon. So I'm just going to hit select. And now I have a custom button there for deleting my history. So I try to group these things into similar things. So like here I have sort of like creation, my 3 different creation buttons. So create polygons, create text or sweet mesh or SVG, create curves. And then we have delete history. And then next I have all of the tools that I actually use quite a bit. So we'll go over those individual tools. Just create a sphere here. The first one being grab tool. So this is a sculpt tool that just lets you grab your polygons and kind of move them around. Now this is something I use very often when I'm modeling like a character or anything organic. I use this tool quite a bit. You can hold down Shift and kind of smooth that stuff out. This is just found in your sculpting tab here. So you can just control middle mouse drag that into your custom shelf if you want that in that shelf. This next one here is smooth. So this will smooth, also found in your sculpting. Not smooth mesh, it's a different tool. So this is sculpt smooth. And what this will do is just sort of smooth the topology of your polygons without changing the shape, right? So like, for example, see how this is kind of bulging out here? This will try to smooth the topology or the edge flow without changing the shape too much. So these are two tools that I use constantly if I'm modeling something organic like a head or a character of some sort. Next up, multi-cut. So don't have to explain the multi-cut tool. It's a tool that I use constantly. So highly recommend. If you're a modeler, you sort of need that one on your shelf. The next one is target weld. So another one that I use very often while I'm modeling. And then I have extrude and smart extrude. So if you don't know the difference between these, let's just create a cube here with some divisions. So extrude is sort of like your basic extrude tool. So if I select a face here, let's go to face mode. Let's do these here in the center. And I hit extrude. I can extrude out. Can sort of scale these up. But if I extrude in, you see how it just sort of punches out the back like that? So the regular extrude is very useful, but it's not smart, right? So then comes in a new feature in Maya called Smart Extrude. So what Smart Extrude will allow you to do is sort of update the geometry as you're extruding. So with Smart Extrude, as I move this to the back of the model, it'll actually cut a hole through the model. So it's a really cool new feature. I personally haven't had the option of using it a lot lately, but I definitely want to. And it gives you a nice little icon there to let you know that you're using the Smart Extrude function. Next is Bridge, another very frequent tool that I use, and it just allows you to bridge between two edges. Right, just like that. Very useful tool. Again, all of these are pretty much some of my most often used tools while modeling. Next up is bevel. Pretty straightforward, right? It just bevels. Everyone should know how to use bevel. Next up, we have circularize. This is a really cool one that I like to use a lot. Let's go ahead and create a new cube. And let's just give this one a lot of division. So I use circularize a lot if I want to put a hole in something. So what I can do is I can just select a group of faces here. So make sure I don't extrude this by accident. And then I can click circularize, which will turn that into a circle. And then I can extrude that in a little bit like that, and then extrude it in a little bit like that. And then if I smooth preview that, we get a pretty nice circle in our geometry. So that circularize function is something that I enjoy using quite a bit. And this is your actual smooth geometry tool. So if I, like I did earlier with the basic cube, which these are, to me, this is just a better sphere than the actual sphere, but this will actually poly smooth your object. So this is not a sculpt smooth like this one, but this is your actual poly smooth. Next is fill hole. So this is one that I use quite a bit. So for example, if I have a hole in my geometry and I just want to fill that with a single face, I can select an edge there and click fill hole, and that will fill that with a single n-gon if need be. And then I can go in with my multi-cut tool and fix that giant n-gon that gets created. For some reason, my multi-cut tool is set to 2 divisions, which I do not like. So let's make sure we turn that off. And then make sure that that works. Yeah. Okay, so that is fill hole. Next, we have connect vertices. Or edges. To be honest, I'm not sure about this one. I don't remember adding this one. I know I added it for a reason. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this just allows me to connect vertices with an edge. So for example, I can click this vert and hold down shift and click that one. So pretty much the same thing as multi-cut tool does. So that's actually pretty cool. Again, it's probably something that I added because I'm like, I should use that more often. But, you know, as you can see that I don't even remember what it did when I tried to use it. And then merge vertices. Merge vertices is also one that I use quite a bit. And all that's going to do is you select multiple vertices and you can click that, and that will just merge those vertices together. So all these are tools that I use while I'm modeling very, very frequently. So these are all very useful tools to use while I'm modeling. Next up is I have my normals tools. Especially if you're low poly modeling, it's very important to understand what your normals are and how to manipulate your normals. So these tools are very, very useful. And these are just found under mesh display. And I have harden, soften, and then the other one I have is conform. And just to show you what those do, if I look at my model here of the sphere, let's go ahead and fix this so it's not an n-gon. Basically what you're seeing here on the sphere is that most of my normals are softened, but then the edges of this one is hardened, so you have this hard edge around it. So if I select everything and I click this one, which is harden all, this will basically make everything look faceted like a diamond or a gemstone. And this hardens all of my normals. This one will soften all of my normals. So now everything looks smooth. And this one will conform my normals. So this one's helpful as you're modeling. Sometimes occasionally you'll get normals that are facing different directions. So for example, if I select these normals and go to mesh display reverse, these turn black because they're facing inward and not outward. What conform will do is just set everything to be facing in one direction. So it did harden those edges as well. So now I just have to soften those. So highly recommend learning about normals. This is one that I talked a lot in the last video. This is something that I learned like way too late in my career. And once I did figure out, oh, I should be like, editing my normals and going through and looking at all my normals. It's a very important thing to get a good looking model. So definitely learn about normals. All right, next we got cleanup. So if you know me, I'm a big fan of mesh cleanup. This will just bring up your cleanup options to look for n-gons. So I can click my object, my model, and hit clean up. It gets deselected, so I know I have no n-gons there. So cleanup, something I use a lot, right? Next we have Mash. So I actually use Mash a lot for modeling. I like playing around with Mash. Mash is actually really fun to sort of mess around with. But I also use it a lot for duplicating a bunch of objects or instancing objects. I actually use Mash a lot as a modeling tool. So I added just a simple create Mash network. So I can just grab my model and create a Mash network out of those. Okay, next I have these. I might actually come back to talk about these two. These are just adding different materials to your object. And the reason I want to come back to them is I think I had to create them sort of a special way. So let's skip these two for now, and then just move forward. So next up we have our Arnold buttons, all of our Arnold lights and our Arnold render preview. So these are basically just in the Arnold tab. It's all of the lights and then the render preview. So that's pretty straightforward because I use these quite a bit when I'm modeling. If I want to throw some quick lights in, I'll use all of these different lights pretty often. And then the next little section here is for mapping, so UV mapping. So I planar project everything to begin with whenever I UV map anything. So I have planar project, and then this brings up my UV texture editor, right? And then planar project, we'll just planar project. And then the cut and sew UV tool, which is really, besides just using tools within the UV toolkit here, this is the only one that's not in the UV toolkit that I use very frequently. So, so very important for me to have that one up as I'm doing UVs. And then over here at the end, we have some various things. And to be honest, I don't remember what all of these do. Import. So this is a great one. So this will actually open our content browser. So this is something that I do find useful, even though I may not use it very often. A lot of times I'll look for examples in the content browser. So this just opens up the content browser. This one opens up the node editor. Sometimes as I'm troubleshooting, I want to look at the node editor and figure things out. This one I believe is light linking. So a relationship editor, so light linking. So this is just a way to make some lights cast light on some things, but not other things. Once you get into rendering and things like that, light linking is pretty huge. So that's something that I do like having in my menu or my custom shelf. And then at the end here, we have edit dynamic relationships. So if I'm doing anything dynamic wise, I just put, I can just really quickly bring up the dynamic relationships. Again, this is something that I'm not sure I use quite enough to dignify it being on my mega shelf. Light linking as well. So it may be something that I take off, but I don't think there's anything wrong. If you have room on your shelf, there's nothing wrong with having more than what you need. And as you figure things out, you can take things away and add things. There's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, as long as you're not getting to the point where you have multiple sort of pages of things on your shelf, because then you're kind of defeating the purpose, because it's probably just quicker just to click through these at that point than to scroll up and down in the shelf itself. Okay, now the two here, materials. I only ever use two materials. And really, I would say that I only ever use one material, but occasionally I do use this other one. And just to explain why that is because when you create a standard surface material, that's this one here. So the button that I have here just adds a new standard surface material to an object like that. So I can then come in and sort of change the colors for it. Effectively, this does the same thing as just right-clicking, assign favorite material, standard surface. And if I'm being honest, I still do this more often just because I'm a creature of habit. I still do this way more often than I come up here and click that button. But that's all that will do is every time you have an object selected and you click that, it will add a new standard surface material to your model. Now, the way I added this to my shelf is I actually went over to rendering and I just, again, held down control and I just middle mouse click and drag that to the shelf that I wanted it on. And I did that same for the surface material. So don't get these two confused. This is a standard surface material, which with the standard surface material, you can basically make any sort of material you want. You want water, you want metal, you want wood, plastic, rubber, glass. You can make just about anything. Some sort of like nuclear glowing material. You can make just about anything with the standard surface material. So usually in the classroom, I tell my students, this is the only material you're allowed to use. Do not use any other material. Not even a blend or a Lambert or anything like that. Just use the standard surface. Learn how to use that standard surface material. And it's, according to Autodesk, it's a renderer agnostic material, meaning that it should be able to be rendered in any renderer. So if you're switching to RenderMan or Redshift or something like that, you should be able to render that standard surface material in those other renderers. Now, for me personally, if I'm rendering in RenderMan, I'm going to use the RenderMan material. If I'm rendering in Redshift, I'm going to use the Redshift material. So, but for the most part in Maya, I'm using Arnold, standard surface material, used for everything. Now, occasionally I do use the surface material, which you shouldn't confuse those two. Surface material is just a flat color. So this does not have any sort of shading to it. This is just a flat color. So I will use this occasionally just for different sort of utility things. Like if I want to add a gradient in the background or something, I'll use a surface material. But all this does is applies a material that is just a flat color to everything. So if I change this to like blue, we can see that that's just a flat blue. So it is something that I use occasionally. I don't use it on anything that I want to look realistic. But I do use that surface material occasionally. Right. So that is my mega shelf. That is all the tools that I use. And again, your mega shelf, your custom shelf that you're making could look completely different. But these are the tools that I find myself using most often as I'm working. And yeah, that's how you create it. Just be mindful that after you create your custom shelf, you want to go to Save All Shelves, located right here. Again, in that little cog. So I changed mine a little bit. I added Delete All by Type History. So I'm going to say Save All Shelves. All right, now say you want to save this shelf out so you can take it with you if you want to put it on another computer, if you want to just keep it on your thumb drive, and maybe if you go work in a lab or something like that, you can put it on your lab computer. So this shelf is going to be found in your documents. If you go to Documents in Maya, and then whatever version of Maya you're working on. For me, I'm working on 2025. And then Prefs, Shelves, and there's my mega shelf right there. And we can see that it's been edited when I saved, which was just about 10 minutes ago, not even like 3 minutes ago, the day after Christmas. So you can just copy and paste that onto your thumb drive and then just copy and paste that into this, and it should load up whenever you load Maya. So that's my custom mega shelf. That's how to make your own custom mega shelf, how to make your separators. One thing I forgot to show you is how to delete your separators. So if you go to your shelf editor and say you want to get rid of a separator, you just find that here. So I can go to mega shelf. We can just find that here, and then I can just click the trash can there to delete that separator. So lots of different sort of customizations you can do here, right? You can even change the colors. So if I wanted to go to my history one here, let's take that one and we can find it. History, icon, label color. Let's maybe change that to red, right? So now it says history in red, which is something that I kind of like that because it's a little bit more dangerous to delete the history of everything than it is just the objects that you have selected. So I'm going to click Save All Shelves. And then just to be sure, I'm going to say Save All Shelves there as well. And now I have my custom shelf saved. So I hope this was informative. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm always happy to make videos. If you have a suggestion of a video for me to make, please don't hesitate to comment. Let me know what sort of information you would like to learn, and I'll do my best to make a video and teach that to you. The other thing that I get sort of related to this, the other thing that I get asked a lot is, do I use any sort of keyboard devices to make my workflow faster? And I feel kind of the same way about that because I do get used to working with all these hotkeys, and then I go to the classroom and I work on a regular keyboard and I'm like completely lost, right? So it just keeps me... It puts me in a better space to help my students when they have questions about things, if I just kind of stick to the default workspace. Now, the one thing that I am attempting to use, I just got this, is the Logitech. I'm not even sure what this thing is called, but it's the Logitech little keypad, and I haven't really programmed anything in it yet, but you can program different macros, so I can have like mesh cleanup just on one button right there. And use that. So I'm kind of excited to kind of mess around with that a little bit. It also comes with this thing, which is a really cool dial for like volume, a brush size. You can program everything. I believe this is undo and redo. So I'm sort of excited to mess around with this. I have in the past used a back in the day it was called Nostromo. Let me see if I can find it really quickly here on Amazon. It used to be owned by Belkin. Now it's owned by Razer. I think maybe just Razer Gamepad. Yeah, this thing right here. So I've used one of these in the past and I found it very useful, extremely efficient if you map all your hotkeys. I really enjoyed using this and I enjoyed using it so much it was difficult for me to go back to just using a mouse and keyboard. So having something like this as you're modeling or even animating, and you can map all the different hotkeys to this is very, very beneficial. So I would recommend something like using this on your personal computer, and it will speed up your modeling process immensely. But for me, again, it's not right for me to use because I'm a teacher and I don't want to be fumbling around in the classroom, and I want to teach as efficiently as possible. So as much as I would love to get one of those and start using it again, it throws me off a little bit, and it's just not practical for me to use that in the classroom. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Once again, if you have any suggestions of videos for me to make, please feel free to comment below. I'm really enjoying making these videos for everyone, not just my students, but for my YouTube community. And I'm really excited to hear, always excited to hear feedback from you guys. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.